The silence in the private medical wing of the Kong estate didn't just feel cold. It felt sterile, like the inside of a vacuum where hope had been sucked out. The only sound was the frantic, high-pitched chirp, chirp, chirp of the life support monitors. It was a rhythmic reminder that time was a currency even the wealthiest man in Korea couldn't hoard. Vitals are dropping. Pressure is 80/40 and falling. A nurse cried out, her voice cracking with a terror that had nothing to do with medicine, and everything to do with the man standing in the shadows of the room. The double doors swung open with a violence that hit the walls like a thunderclap. Kong Jace walked in. He didn't look like a man who had just flown 10 hours from a business deal in Singapore. He looked like a god of war returning to a fallen city. His black overcoat trailed behind him like a cape of shadows, and the guards in the hallway instinctively bowed so low their foreheads nearly touched their knees. "Report," Jace commanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a subsonic vibration that made the glass vials on the instrument tray rattle. The lead physician, Dr. Choi, stepped forward, wiping beads of sweat from his upper lip with a trembling hand. "Chairman, we've done everything within the realm of modern science. The neurotoxin from the assassination attempt has reached the brainstem. We've cycled the blood twice. But the organs are. They're failing, sir." Jace moved with a predatory grace, stopping inches from the doctor. He was a head taller, his eyes 2 chips of frozen obsidian. "What do you mean everything? I built this wing. I bought the equipment before it hit the European markets. I pay you more than the Prime Minister. Are you telling me my son is dying because your modern science has reached its limit? His condition is worsening." Rapidly, the nurse whispered, staring at the monitor. The heart rate line was beginning to flatten, the peaks becoming shallow valleys. The silence that followed was absolute. Jace turned to look at his 7-year-old son, Kong Shin. The boy looked like a broken bird, his skin the color of damp parchment. Jace felt a rage so pure it threatened to choke him. He had killed dozens to keep this boy safe, and yet a microscopic toxin was doing what an army of rivals couldn't. Suddenly, a soft shadow moved near the doorway. Among the frantic doctors and the stone-faced guards, a woman in a charcoal gray uniform stepped into the light. She was black, her presence a stark, calm contrast to the clinical chaos. She held a bucket and a cloth, her head bowed in the way of a well-trained servant. "The room is restricted," a guard barked, moving to intercept her. "Let her be," Jace snapped, not looking back. He was staring at the flatline beginning to form on the screen. "Get out. All of you. If he dies while you are staring at your useless machines, I will bury you with him." The staff scrambled out, terrified. But the maid didn't leave. She stood at the foot of the bed, her eyes fixed on the dying boy. "I said get out," Jace hissed, his hand moving to the holster at his hip. "The machines are lying to you, Mr. Kong," the woman said. Her voice was like silk sliding over stone, cool, smooth, and unshakable. Jace froze. "What?" "The machines say he is leaving," Faith said, stepping closer to the bed. Ignoring the gun Jace was now half drawing. "But his spirit is just lost. I can help him." Jace's eyes narrowed. The tension in the room was a physical weight. "You're a maid. You clean my floors. You don't help people back from the grave." "I've seen deeper graves than this one," Faith replied, her eyes meeting his. She didn't look at him with fear. She looked at him with pity. "Check the monitor, Mr. Kong. You have 10 seconds before the silence becomes permanent. Do you want to be right? Or do you want your son back?" Jace looked at the monitor. A long, continuous beep started to fill the room. The flatline was a straight, uncompromising horizon. Death had arrived. "Do it," Jace whispered, his voice a jagged edge of desperation. "But if you fail, you will never leave this room." Faith didn't answer. She simply reached out and took the boy's hand. The Kong estate was not a home. It was a sovereign nation, situated on the jagged cliffs of the Seoul coastline. It was a sprawling fortress of black marble and reinforced glass. Every inch of the property was monitored by high-definition cameras and patrolled by men who had been discharged from elite special forces units. To the world, Kong Jace was a global logistics titan. To the underworld, he was the Shadow King of the Phoenix Syndicate. He was a man who didn't believe in luck, fate, or God. He believed in logistics. If you controlled the supply chain, you controlled the world. In the wake of the medical crisis, the estate had become a hive of high-stakes tension. Jace sat in his office, the walls covered in monitors showing every corner of his empire. He was a man of cold intellect, but for the first time in his life, his calculations were returning errors. "Sir." His lead guard, Han, entered and bowed. "The medical staff has been quarantined in the secondary barracks as per your orders. They are distressed." "Let them be distressed," Jace said, his eyes fixed on the feed from Shin's room. "If my son dies, none of those doctors leave this building alive. I don't pay for excuses. I pay for results, and so far, a woman who mops my hallways is outperforming them." Regarding the woman, Faith, Han continued, his voice hesitant. "She has no record of medical training. Her background check from the agency shows she worked in a hospice in Johannesburg before moving to London, and then Seoul. Her references say she is quiet and efficient. Nothing about this. This was the fact that the machines in Shin's room were now humming with a steady, impossible rhythm. Jay stood up and walked to the window. Below him, the sea lashed against the rocks. He was a man feared by the most dangerous criminals in Asia, yet he felt a strange, creeping chill whenever he thought of the way Faith had looked at him. She wasn't scared of the Shadow King. "She is an anomaly," Jace muttered. "And I hate anomalies. Should we remove the staff from the wing entirely, sir? To maintain the secret?" "No," Jace said. "I want guards on her every second. She is not to eat, sleep, or breathe without someone watching. If she is a plant from the Kim family or the Triads, I want to know the moment she makes a move." In the medical wing, Faith was an island of stillness. She was ignored by the guards, who looked through her as if she were furniture. She moved quietly, cleaning a smudge on the glass, adjusting the curtains to block the harsh morning sun from Shin's eyes. She paused by the boy's bed. She didn't touch him this time. She just watched the way his chest rose and fell. It was a subtle moment, but Jace, watching through the camera, noticed her gaze lingered a second too long. It wasn't the look of a servant. It was the look of someone watching a flickering candle in a storm. An hour later, Jace entered the room. The smell of ozone and expensive cologne followed him. Faith was polishing a chrome stand near the window. "Who allowed her in here to begin with?" Jace asked, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. The guard at the door straightened. "She was assigned to this wing's morning maintenance, chairman. The head of house didn't revoke her access." "She's just a maid, sir," the guard added, his tone dismissive. "She shouldn't be a threat." Jace walked toward Faith. He didn't stop until he was in her personal space, forcing her to look up. She was smaller than him, but she didn't shrink. "A just a maid doesn't stop a flatline," Jace said. "A just a maid doesn't look at the head of the Phoenix Syndicate and tell him his machines are lying." "Who are you working for?" Faith set her cloth down carefully. "I work for you, Mr. Kong. You pay my salary every Friday." "Don't play word games with me," Jace hissed, his hand gripping her chin, forcing her to maintain eye contact. "I've had men tortured for less than the mystery you're performing. How did you stabilize him? What drug did you palm? What did you inject into his line?" "I didn't give him medicine," Faith said, her voice remaining impossibly calm despite the terrifying man holding her. "He is suffering, Mr. Kong. But not just physically. This house, it is full of ghosts and heavy hearts. The boy is suffocating under the weight of your world." Jace's grip tightened for a second before he pushed her away with a snarl of disgust. "Superstitious nonsense. You're a hospice worker who got lucky with a cardiac spike. If it was luck, then why are you still in this room?" she asked quietly. "Why haven't you thrown me out yet?" Jace paused. He didn't have an answer that satisfied his logic. He turned to the guards. "Order the lab to run a full tox screen on the boy's blood again. I want to see if there are any trace elements of unapproved stimulants. And as for her," he pointed a finger at Faith, "she stays. She doesn't leave this wing. If she tries to contact anyone outside this estate, kill her." Faith didn't look bothered by the death threat. She simply walked back to the bedside and adjusted the boy's blanket. "He is not alone," she whispered, almost to herself. Jace froze at the doorway. What did you say? He's been alone for a long time, Faith said, her voice echoing in the sterile room. Even when you're standing right here. He's alone. That's why he was leaving. He didn't see a reason to stay. Jace's face flushed with a rare moment of visible emotion. Guilt. Masked instantly by rage. You know nothing of my son. You are here to clean. Nothing more. But as he left the room, his mind was racing. He looked at the monitors again. Shin's heart rate was the most stable it had been in years. It wasn't just stable, it was peaceful. Han, Jace said into his radio. I want every scrap of information on Faith. I don't care if you have to hack the South African government or the Vatican. Find out where she learned to talk like that. And find out why my son's heart beats better when she's in the room. The sun began to dip behind the jagged cliffs, casting long, skeletal shadows across the medical wing. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Jay stood behind the observation glass, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes fixed on the monitors. The toxin in Shin's system was a stubborn enemy. Every time the doctors thought they had gained ground, the boy's temperature would spike, and his oxygen levels would plummet. He's losing air again, Jace muttered, his voice a low growl. Inside the room, the alarms began their frantic dance. Dr. Choi rushed in, sweat soaking his collar. Increase the flow. We need to intubate again. He's rejecting the ventilator. Faith, who had been standing silently in the corner with her cleaning supplies, suddenly moved. She didn't run, she glided toward the bed. Her presence seemed to cut through the panic like a cooling mist. Step away from the patient, Han barked, his hand moving to his sidearm as he followed Jace into the room. Faith ignored him. She reached the bedside just as Dr. Choi was about to jam a tube down Shin's throat. Wait, she said. It wasn't a request, it was an absolute. This is a medical emergency. Woman, Choi screamed. He's suffocating. He's not suffocating because of the air, Faith said, her eyes locked on Shin's fluttering eyelids. He's suffocating because you're forcing him. Let him find his own rhythm. Jay stepped forward, his face a mask of calculated fury. He looked at the blue tint on his son's lips, then at Faith's unshakable expression. The logic in his brain told him to let the doctor work. But the instinct that had kept him alive in the trenches of the soul underworld told him that the doctor was failing. Let her try, Jace said. The words felt like lead in his mouth. Chairman Choi gasped. This is madness. He'll be dead in 2 minutes. Then you'll have 2 minutes to prepare your final will. Doctor, Jace replied, his gaze never leaving Faith. Step back. All of you. The medical team retreated, their faces a mix of horror and disbelief. Faith leaned over Shin. She didn't use a stethoscope. She didn't check the foredrip. She simply placed one hand on the boy's forehead, and the other over his heart. She closed her eyes. The room went silent. Even the mechanical whirring of the machines seemed to dampen, as if the electricity itself were holding its breath. May he find peace. Even in pain, Faith whispered. At first, nothing happened. The monitors continued to scream their warnings. Dr. Choi gripped his clipboard so hard it snapped. Jace felt his heart hammer against his ribs, a rare, terrifying sensation. He was seconds away from pulling Faith away and ending her life. Then, the shift happened. It wasn't a miracle of light or sound. It was a subtle change in the air. The harsh, metallic smell of the hospital wing was momentarily replaced by the faint, earthy scent of rain on dry soil. The jagged lines on the oxygen monitor began to smooth out. The frantic beeping slowed, finding a steady, rhythmic cadence. Shin's breathing, which had been a series of ragged, desperate gasps, softened into a deep, peaceful slumber. The blue tint faded from his lips, replaced by a ghost of a healthy flush. The O2 levels. The nurse whispered, staring at the screen in shock. They're climbing. He's breathing on his own. Without the assist. Jace felt a shiver of something he couldn't name, suspicion laced with a profound, terrifying awe. He watched as Faith slowly pulled her hands away. She looked paler than she had 5 minutes ago, her shoulders sagging as if she had just carried a heavy physical burden. What did you do? Jace asked, his voice barely a whisper. Faith didn't look at him. She looked at Shin. I gave him a reason to stay, she said simply. By midnight, the estate was in a state of high-security lockdown. Jace was back in his office, but he wasn't looking at logistics maps. He was looking at a file Han had just placed on his desk. The background check is complete. Sir, Han said, his face grim. The unusual. Jace flipped through the pages. Tell me. She was born in a small village outside Johannesburg. Her mother was a healer, what they call a woman of prayer. She died when Faith was young. Faith spent 10 years working in the most dangerous hospices in the country. Patients she touched often had unexplained recoveries, but she never took credit. She moved to London, worked in a pediatric ward, then disappeared for a year before showing up in Seoul on a work visa. Jace leaned back, his eyes narrowing. No medical license, no formal training, just a series of unexplained recoveries trailing behind her like a shadow. There's more, Han added. The doctor she worked with in London. He claimed that after she handled a patient, she would often fall ill herself. Fevers, exhaustion, sometimes even losing consciousness. He called it empathetic transference. He was eventually fired for trying to study her like a lab rat. Jace's mind worked with the speed of a high-frequency trading algorithm. He thought of the way Faith had looked after the prayer, the way her strength seemed to have drained into his son. She's a battery, Jace muttered. A biological conduit. Or she's a very clever actress using some kind of biofeedback trickery. Han countered. Sir, if word gets out that you have a woman in this house who can cure the incurable, the Phoenix Syndicate will be the least of your worries. Every government and cartel on the planet will be at your gates. I know, Jace said, his voice hardening, which is why she never leaves. Han, I want the guest wing in the North Tower prepared. It's to be turned into a high-security suite. She sleeps there. She eats there. She is only moved when Shin needs her. Jace stood up and walked to the medical wing. He found Faith sitting in a chair outside Shin's room, her head resting against the wall, her eyes closed. She looked small, vulnerable, and yet she was the only person in the world who had power over him. Where did you learn this? Jace asked, his voice startling her. Faith opened her eyes. They were deep, dark pools of ancient weariness. I didn't learn it. Mr. Kong, you don't learn how to breathe. You just do it. Then what are you? Jace stepped closer, his shadow engulfing her. Are you a saint? A freak? A weapon? Faith looked up at him, a faint, sad smile touching her lips. I'm just someone who remembers pain. I know what it's like to have the world try to take everything from you. Your son. He was ready to give up. I just reminded him that he isn't the only one fighting. Jace felt a pang of something that felt dangerously like emotion. He quickly buried it under a layer of ice. The medical readings show his neural pathways are repairing themselves. Choi is calling it a 1 in a billion occurrence. But I noticed something else. His vitals only stay high when you are within 10 feet of him. He's tethered, Faith said softly. He's afraid that if I leave, the dark will come back. Jace leaned down, his face inches from hers. The scent of her, something like rainwater and lavender, clashed with the sterile hospital air. Then you aren't leaving. You will stay in this house. You will be his shadow. And if you ever try to use this gift to manipulate me or my son, I'm not the one who uses people as weapons. Mr. Kong, Faith interrupted, her voice steady. That's your world, not mine. Jace's jaw tightened. He wanted to break her spirit, to make her fear him like everyone else did. But as he looked at her, he realized with a jolt of alarm that he was the one who was becoming dependent. Without this woman, his son was a corpse. That made her the most powerful person in the Phoenix Syndicate. Han, Jace called out without looking away from her. Escort her to the North Suite. She is to be monitored 24/7. No exceptions. As the guards led her away, Jace walked into his son's room. Shin was sleeping, his chest rising and falling with a strength Jace hadn't seen in months. He sat on the edge of the bed and touched the boy's hand. It was warm. Jace looked toward the door where Faith had disappeared. Suspicion and obsession were beginning to weave together in his mind. He didn't trust her. He didn't understand her. But he knew one thing. He would never let her go. The north suite of the Kong estate was a gilded prison. Every wall was soundproofed. Every window was made of reinforced polycarbonate, and the air was filtered through a military-grade system. Faith sat by the window, watching the moonlight dance on the restless waves of the East Sea. She was no longer wearing the charcoal gray maid's uniform. She had been given clothes of silk and cashmere, expensive, beautiful, and utterly devoid of her own identity. Jace entered without knocking. He had traded his suit jacket for a dark sweater, but the aura of a predator remained. He watched her for a long moment before speaking. "He woke up an hour ago," Jace said. "The first thing he did was reach for the space where you were sitting. When he realized you weren't there, his heart rate spiked to 130. Faith didn't turn around. You're treating me like a biological pacemaker. Mr. Kong, you've locked me in a tower because you're afraid of the very thing that saved him." "I'm protecting my investment," Jace countered, walking toward her. "And I'm protecting you. Do you have any idea what would happen if the syndicate boards found out I was keeping a miracle worker in my guest wing? They wouldn't send flowers, Faith. They would send an extraction team." "You don't trust me," Faith said, finally turning to face him. Her eyes were tired, but they held a piercing clarity that made Jace uncomfortable. "You've checked my history, you've scanned my blood, and you've put guards at my door. Yet, here you are, asking me to stay." Jace stopped a foot away from her. The power dynamic in the room was shifting. On paper, he owned her. He owned the land she stood on and the air she breathed. But in reality, he was a beggar at her door. "I don't ask," Jace whispered, his voice dropping into that dangerous, intimate register. "I command. But with you, the rules seem to be different. Shin won't eat unless you're in the room. He won't sleep unless he hears you humming. You've woven yourself into his life in 3 days. And what about you?" Jace, Faith asked, using his name for the first time. The sound of it made his pulse jump, a physical reaction he couldn't control. "Are you staying because of your son? Or are you staying because you're waiting for me to fail?" Jace didn't answer. Instead, he reached out, his hand hovering near her face before his fingers finally brushed against her temple. He felt that faint, residual warmth again. It wasn't just heat. It felt like a low-frequency hum, a vibration that seemed to calm the constant storm of violence and strategy inside his own head. "I'm staying because for the first time in 10 years, the silence in this house doesn't feel like a grave," he confessed. The moment was interrupted by the sharp crackle of Jace's radio. "Chairman, to the medical suite. Now the young master, it's happening again." They ran. Jace's longer strides nearly left Faith behind, but he reached back and gripped her hand, pulling her through the corridors of the estate. When they burst into the room, the scene was a nightmare of flashing lights and mechanical screaming. Shin was thrashing. This wasn't like the previous seizure. This was violent. His small body arching off the bed, his skin turning a terrifying, mottled purple. "His lungs are seizing," Dr. Choi yelled, his hands shaking as he held an adrenaline shot. "The toxin is mutating. It's attacking the respiratory center." "Move," Jace roared, throwing Choi aside. He looked at Faith, his eyes wide with a raw, naked panic. "Faith, save him, do it again." Faith rushed to the side of the bed. She was already pale, her strength not yet fully recovered from the previous night. She took Shin's face in her hands. "Shin, look at me. Look at my voice. Stay here. Stay with me." She closed her eyes and began to pray, her lips moving in a frantic, silent plea. She reached deep into herself, searching for that spark of light, that conduit of heat she used to bridge the gap between life and death. But this time, something was wrong. When the heat began to flow, it didn't feel like a gentle stream. It felt like an explosion. Faith's body jerked as if she had touched a live wire. She let out a strangled cry, her eyes snapping open. But they were clouded with a milky, golden haze. "Faith!" Jace grabbed her shoulders, trying to steady her. "Faith! What's happening? Please!" "Not yet," Faith whispered, her voice sounding like it was coming from a great distance. The machines went haywire. The EKG started beeping wildly, Not a flat line, but a chaotic, erratic rhythm that made no sense. The lights in the room began to flicker and pop, glass shards raining down from the ceiling as the bulbs exploded. Something is wrong. The equipment is failing, Dr. Choi screamed, covering his head. Shin's body went suddenly, terrifyingly still. His eyes remained open, staring at nothing. The monitors gave one final, distorted screech and then went completely dark. The backup generators groaned and failed to kick in. The room was plunged into a suffocating darkness, illuminated only by the faint, rhythmic flashes of the emergency red lights. What did you do? Jace's voice was a ragged howl of agony. He grabbed Faith, shaking her, his face a mask of horror in the flickering red light. Faith, bring him back. Use the light, bring him back. Faith didn't answer. She was still standing over the boy, her hands pressed to his chest, her head bowed. She was perfectly still, her breath coming in slow, shallow gasps. In the shadows, Shin's hand suddenly twitched, not with life but with a strange, unnatural strength. His fingers gripped Faith's wrist with a force that made her bones creak. Faith, Jace whispered, his hand going to his gun as he saw the boy's eyes begin to glow with the same milky, golden haze as face. What have you done to my son? Faith looked up at Jace, a single tear of blood tracking down her cheek. I didn't just save him. Jace, she whispered. I opened the door. And now, something else is coming through. The screen went dark, but the mystery has only just begun. What exactly did Faith bring back from the other side? And what will Jace do now that his son is no longer human? The screen has gone dark, but as the title promised, everything has officially changed. Faith didn't just save a life today. She altered the fate of the syndicate forever. But what exactly is coming through that door? And can Jace protect his son from the very miracle that saved him? If you are ready for part 2, where the mystery of Faith's power and Jace's growing obsession takes a dark turn, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Don't forget to turn on all notifications so you are the first to know when the next chapter drops. Leave a comment below with the word change if you are buckled in for this journey. Your likes and comments are what keep this story alive. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next part very soon.